What is good, my beautiful DC brothers and sisters? It's your boy, the Truth 31. Hit like, subscribe for all that DC goodness on your face, neck, and chest. And before there was Zack Snyder's Justice League coming out in 2021, thank the Lord for that. We were going to get, in 2008, George Miller's Justice League Mortal. Yes, George Miller, the man, the genius behind the Mad Max movies. And let me just say, his unique take on the DC characters and the DC world would have been very, very interesting, because I feel like George Miller drew heavy inspiration from Alex Ross. I think his Justice League would have been very much very similar to Zack Snyder's Justice League in terms of being so grand, operatic, mythic in its storytelling, in its scope, in its visuals. And especially since, George Miller's Justice League was going to take inspiration from comic book stories like the JLA Tower of Babel and Superman Sacrifice. So it would have been very, very interesting. And of course, Megan Gale, the beautiful Megan Gale, she would have been Wonder Woman. And at that time, she was a model and stuff like that, which, surprise, surprise, a model, because she's obviously not that attractive. But she looks. I love the costume. It looks like Wonder Woman to me. Obviously, fucking just gorgeous from head to toe, and we got some concept art from that movie, especially with Themyscira here. Dude, look at that. That looks like comic book. That's Themyscira right there. Again, like the visual style, the visual tone that George Miller would have brought to this film. Again, whether disbarring the script, whether you like it or not, because I think the script is out there somewhere on the internet, so you can go read it. It's very comic booky, it's very grand, it's very epic, and I think it would have been very, very cool to see. And the cast of this movie, again, remember, this is back in 2007, 2008, so now we know them as big stars, but at that time, they were fairly new. So Armie Hammer, as we all know, was going to be Batman Bruce Wayne. Megan Gale, Diana, Wonder Woman. DJ Cotrona was going to be Clark Kent Superman. And DJ Cotrona, if you don't know who that is, he's a Latino. So we're going to have a Latino Superman, Clark Kent, which would have been interesting. And if you haven't seen From Dusk Till Dawn, the TV series, go watch that. He's the main character. He's the older brother. So that would have been Superman. Adam Brody as Barry Allen the Flash would have been interesting. Hugh Keys Byrne as John John's Martian Manhunter. Again, very similar to Justice League from Zack Snyder. Very interesting. Teresa Palmer as Talia. Zoe Kazan as Iris Allen. Santiago Cabrera was going to be Aquaman, Arthur Curry. That's Superman right there. He looks the part, so it would have been interesting. I know some people wouldn't have liked that, but again, it's whatever. Jay Baruchel as Maxwell Lord. Very interesting. Sort of similar to Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor, where you don't really see him as Maxwell Lord, just like you don't really see Jesse Eisenberg as Lex Luthor. But hey, if it worked, it worked. Common, the rapper, John Stewart, Green Lantern. I like that choice. And Anton Yelchin, the late great Anton Yelchin. He would have been Wally West, the Flash. So George Miller was going to introduce legacy characters. George Miller was going to introduce Wally West. Oh, that would have been amazing. And again, so the production history is very, very troubled. Again, this is more concept art from the Justice League. Again, George Miller would have been a good director for this movie, because again, his visual style is very operatic and very large in scope, so and would have been perfect for Justice League back at that time. But in February 2007, Warner Brothers hired Kieran and Michelle Maroney to write a script for Justice League, which they handed in that June to positive feedback from the studio. So the studio liked it. George Miller signed on to direct in September 2007, while the studio hoped filming would start before the 2007-2008 Writers Guild of America strike. So basically, the downfall for this movie was the writer's strike, and it was a wrap after that. And by the way, look at this costume for Barry Allen, Adam Brody. Again, I don't think this would have been the final look for the film. This is just concept art, but I like it. I don't know why it's black and silver. That's a very strange choice. Again, I don't think it would have been like this in the movie, but very, very unique. Again, George Miller would have done something very different with this film. So the studio is considering filming Justice League. Get this. The studio actually had this idea of filming Justice League in motion capture, like Beowulf and like the Polar Express with Tom Hanks. That would have been crazy. That would have been, I don't know who thought that would have been a good idea, but that person should have been fired. Barry Osborne was to produce with a $220 million budget. $220 million budget this movie would have gotten back in 2007, 2008. And by the way, I love this cowl. Oof. I love the lines. Again, very Alex Ross-esque in its design of the cowl. It makes him look much older, even though Armie Hammer was like very young at that time. So again, it would have been very interesting to see. Again, more concept art, which is amazing. Mara Allen was originally hired as a costume designer, but she died in November 2007. The Weta Workshop, who's it took over like many like large epic movies in general. Took over costume design, a decision which opens the possibility of their sister company, Weta Digital, doing the visual effects. So again, like this movie had like a lot of heavy hitters backing it up and making sure that it would have been like epic in scope the way George Miller had intended. And again, the concept art very unique, very different. Armie Hammer's Batman costume. This concept art looks like he's going into war, going into battle. So again, it just like overall like during the production, it just went into production hell. Like things started falling apart, which I said earlier was, once that writer strike happened, like that was it. Like and the budget was ballooning up to like more and more, like 300 million, and this was coming at the time of the MCU, because remember, this movie was supposed to release in 2007, 2008, and that's where the first Iron Man came out. So the MCU was really shaping into form and stuff like that. And of course, we had the Dark Knight trilogy with Christopher Nolan, who the studio, completely backed. And obviously Batman Begins, with the success of Batman Begins and the billion-dollar hit that was, The Dark Knight, Warner Brothers actually handpicked Christopher Nolan to, they backed him up to direct, Justice League and stuff like that, and really be in control of the DC properties. Because, again, he did such a great job with the Dark Knight trilogy. But of course, Christopher Nolan didn't want anything to do with that whatsoever. He was like, nah, I'm good, bro. It's like, I'm good. And at that time, since they wanted to really, be like Marvel, like always, and they like the studio thinking behind this is so strange. So they had ideas of, building up all the solo films. So they had an idea of building the Ryan Reynolds 2011 Green Lantern film. Because remember, at that time, the Green Lantern film with Ryan Reynolds, that was supposed to be their starting point for the DCEU that we see now with Zack Snyder. So they were counting on that film to be a massive success. So that way, that could lead the charge of, going into Man of Steel, going into Wonder Woman, Aquaman, and so forth and so forth. But of course, with the critical and box office failure of that movie, that whole plan just got shut down. And, again, look at this concept art. Again, what George Miller had in mind, like with the fight sequences between Wonder Woman and Superman and all that stuff, go read the script. Like the script is out there, and the action sequences that George Miller had in mind for all these films, just with the Flash and Wonder Woman and Superman and all that stuff, and the fact that he was going to introduce OMAC, the robots, and at the end of the film, George Miller was going to introduce Starro. Starro was going to be introduced at the final sequence of the film with the Justice League, all shooting up into space to fight this giant starfish. Again, like it would have been so comic accurate and so cool, like especially at that time where George Miller wasn't really because again, this was since the MCU was starting, the comic book genre, other than Spider-Man 2 and Iron Man, it wasn't really a big selling point. It wasn't really, people weren't really expecting it to be a big hit. But it's just because of the Justice League, because of the DC characters, because these characters are so iconic, I think George Miller understood that, and he was willing to take a chance with these characters and not go into solo film after solo film after solo film. He was going to do that, but the Justice League film was going to be the branching off point. And that's what George Miller had in mind. But of course, the studio panicked with the failure of Green Lantern, and with the success of Christopher Nolan, who didn't want, like I said, didn't want to do the Justice League. He handpicked Zack Snyder to do Man of Steel, and the rest is history. Now we're getting Zack Snyder's Justice League in 2021, And with the writer strike and the budget ballooning up to 200 or 300 million, uh, George Miller stepped off, and he was like, you know what, I'm done. And the project fell apart, and now we're getting Zack Snyder's Justice League. So again, the history behind this film, I think Ryan Unicomb, he's doing a documentary of Justice League Mortal, and the story and the characters and the production hell that this movie went through. It would have been very interesting to see what George Miller would have done with this if everything had gone to plan. Because again, the cast is great, the story, it would have been interesting, and George Miller would have given us a unique Justice League for sure. But anyway, those are my thoughts. Smash that like button, my beautiful DC brothers and sisters. Subscribe, hit me up on Twitter, Instagram. Let's continue having a DC conversation as always. Support DC, love DC. Would you have been interested in seeing George Miller's Justice League? Comment down below, let me know what you think. And yeah, George Miller's Justice League would have been very, very interesting. So hopefully one day George Miller can come back to the DC universe and maybe work on something. You never know. So, and as always, truth out.